Fleet Commander Varacios stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the massive display screen in front of him with great pride and satisfaction in his 4 eyes. 100,000 warships filled the space around the small blue planet. Called Earth by its native inhabitants, the ships stretched in every direction like an endless sea of metal and weapons and power that no species in the known galaxy had ever challenged, and Servervid Varaxios clicked his sharp mandibles together. In what passed for a smile among his species, the Kethvari, who had conquered 37 worlds and enslaved countless billions in their long march across the stars, the humans had been given a simple choice: submit to the hegemony and become another servant race in the great empire, or face complete and total destruction of their primitive civilization. They had chosen poorly. Fleet Commander, his second officer Crixnell, spoke with excitement in his clicking voice. Our sensors show the humans are finally responding to our presence. Varaxios turned his armored head slowly and fixed his subordinate with a cold stare. Show me what these foolish creatures have decided to do. The main display shifted and zoomed toward the blue planet below them, and every officer on the bridge leaned forward with eager anticipation. What they saw made them pause in confusion. A single ship rose from the planet's surface and climbed steadily through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of white vapor behind it as it pushed toward space. Just one ship. Varaxios waited for more ships to appear, because surely this could not be the entire human response to an invasion fleet of 100,000 vessels. But no other ships came. The lone human vessel cleared the atmosphere and oriented itself toward the center of the hegemony formation where the flagship waited. Is this some kind of joke? Crixnell asked with genuine bewilderment in his voice. The bridge crew began to make sounds of amusement and mockery as they watched the tiny ship approach. Perhaps they are surrendering, the weapons officer suggested. One ship carrying their leaders to beg for mercy would make sense given their hopeless situation. Varaxios studied the approaching vessel carefully on his personal display screen, and he felt something strange stir in his gut. The ship was not large by warship standards, but it was not small either, and it measured roughly 800 meters from front to back. But it was the design that caught his attention and made that strange feeling grow stronger. The vessel looked nothing like the sleek and elegant warships of the hegemony that were designed for beauty as much as function. This human ship was ugly and brutal and covered in thick armor, plates that showed signs of damage and repair from countless battles. Weapons bristled from every surface in a way that seemed almost desperate and excessive, with gun turrets and missile tubes and strange devices that his sensors could not identify. Packed onto every available space, the hull was scarred and burned in places, but those scars had been left unrepaired, as if the humans wanted to display them proudly like medals of honor, and painted across the front of the ship in bold white letters that stood out against the dark metal was a name in the human language: USCV. Consequences. What a strange name for a vessel. Crixnell observed. Advortius did not respond because he was too busy studying the energy readings coming from that ship, and what he saw did not make sense. The power output was far too high for a ship of that size, and the weapon signatures were unlike anything in the hegemony database. Hail them, he commanded finally. Let us hear what these humans have to say before we destroy them. The communications officer worked his console, and moments later the main display flickered and changed to show the inside of the human ship. A human female stood in the center of what appeared to be a command bridge filled with screens and controls and officers working at various stations. She had hair that was dark with streaks of gray, and a face that showed the lines of age and experience, and eyes that looked directly at Varaxios without any trace of fear or submission. Those eyes bothered him more than he wanted to admit. She smiled, and Varaxios saw her teeth, which was a display that humans apparently used to show friendliness, but which looked like a threat. Display to his species. This is Captain Helena Vance of the United Earth Coalition vessel. Consequences. she said in a voice that was calm and steady and almost casual. "You have entered Earth space with hostile intent, and you have 20 minutes to withdraw your forces from the system." The bridge exploded. With laughter and clicking sounds of amusement from every officer present, Crixnall nearly fell over from the force of his amusement. And even the normally serious weapons officer made sounds of disbelief and mockery. "One ship," Crixnall managed to say between clicks of laughter. "One ship threatens 100,000. Veraxios did not laugh. He watched Captain Vance on the screen and noticed that her expression did not change at all in response to the mockery. She simply waited with that same calm smile on her face, as if she had expected exactly this reaction and found it neither surprising nor concerning. "Human." Veraxios spoke loudly enough to silence his crew. "I have commanded fleets for longer than your species has possessed space travel, and I have seen many forms of courage and stupidity across the galaxy. But I must admit this is something new." Captain Vance nodded slightly, as if accepting a compliment. "Your people are known to us," Veraxios continued. "We have studied your transmissions and your history and your culture, and we know you are a young species prone to violence and conflict, even among yourselves." "That is true," Vance agreed easily. "Then you must know that one ship, regardless of its capabilities, cannot stand against the combined might of the hegemony armada." "Must I?" Vance asked, and something in her tone made Veraxios pause. "You are bluffing," he declared, "trying to buy time perhaps for evacuation or for some desperate plan that cannot possibly succeed." Captain Vance leaned forward slightly, and her smile faded into something harder and more serious. "Commander Veraxios," she said, "in all your studies of humanity, did you ever learn about the Yellowstone Accords?" The name meant nothing to him, and he saw from the confused expressions of his officers that none of them recognized it either. "You have 19 minutes, Vance said. "I suggest you spend them wisely." The transmission ended, and the screen returned to showing the image of that single ugly scarred ship hanging in space before the might of 100,000 warships. Veraxios stared at it for a long moment while his crew waited for orders. "Should we destroy it now, Fleet Commander?" the weapons officer asked eagerly. "One volley from the forward batteries would reduce it to atoms." Veraxios considered the option carefully and tried to understand why he felt so reluctant to give that obvious order. It was just one ship. What could one ship possibly do? "No," he said. "Finally, let them have their 20 minutes and let them see that their threats mean nothing to us, and when the time runs out, we will show them what happens to species that defy the hegemony." He turned away from the display and walked toward his command chair. "Besides," he added, "I want to know what the Yellowstone Accords are and why she thought that name would matter to us." That question would be answered soon enough, and Veraxios would spend the rest of his very short life wishing he had simply destroyed that ship when he had the chance. Captain Hellinger Vance turned away from the communication screen and looked at her bridge crew with steady eyes that showed no worry or doubt. Her First Officer Commander James Chun stood beside the tactical station with his arms crossed over his chest and a grim expression on his weathered face. "They laughed," Chen observed without surprise in his voice. "They always laugh," Vance replied, as she walked back to her command chair and sat down with the ease of someone who had done this many times before. "Every species we have encountered has laughed at us at first. The bridge of the consequences was not a large space, but every inch of it served a purpose and held some piece of equipment or weapon control or sensor." Display 32. Crew members worked at their stations in focused silence because they knew what was coming, and they had trained for this moment for years. 17 minutes remaining. Captain, the tactical officer Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez reported from her station. "The alien fleet has not moved." Vance nodded slowly and steepled her fingers in front of her face as she considered the situation. 100,000 enemy warships surrounded Earth in a formation designed to prevent any escape and to allow concentrated Fire from multiple angles. The aliens had clearly done this before and knew how to conduct a proper siege of a planet, but they had never faced humanity before. Open a channel to Earth Command, Vance ordered. Let them know the timer has started. The communication officer worked his console, and moments later, the face of Admiral William Foster appeared on a secondary screen. Foster was an old man with white hair and deep lines on his dark skin that told the story of decades spent defending humanity from threats both internal and external. Helena, he said simply. I take it they refused to withdraw. They laughed at us, William. Foster nodded as if this was exactly what he expected to happen. Then the decision is made and the responsibility falls on them, not on us. Agreed, Vance said. But I want it on record that we gave them every chance to leave peacefully. It is recorded and witnessed by every nation on Earth, Foster confirmed. The Yellowstone Accords are clear about this, and we have followed every protocol. Then we proceed. Godspeed, Helena, and bring our people home safe. The connection ended, and Vance sat in silence for a moment, as the weight of what was about to happen pressed down on her shoulders. Captain, Chun said quietly, as he moved to stand beside her chair, you know there is no other way. I know, James, she replied, but that does not make it easier. She straightened in her chair and pushed aside her doubts because there was no room for hesitation in what came. Next, all stations report readiness, she commanded one. By one, her officers reported that their systems were prepared and weapons were charged and shields were at maximum power. The consequences had been built for exactly this situation, and every system had been tested and checked and tested again. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Vance said, please explain to the crew what they are about to witness. Rodriguez stood from her station and faced the bridge crew with the bearing of someone about to deliver a history lesson 17 years ago. She began, humanity made a choice, and that choice changed everything about who we are as a species. She pulled up a display showing images of Earth from the past with mushroom clouds and burning cities and fields of dead soldiers stretching to the horizon. For 10,000 years we made war on each other, and we got very, very good at it. The images changed to show weapons of every kind, from stone axes to nuclear missiles to things that looked like they came from nightmares. We invented ways to kill each other that no other species in the galaxy has imagined, because we had to keep finding new ways to overcome the defenses. We built against the last way. Rodriguez paused and let the images speak for themselves. Chemical weapons that dissolve flesh, and biological agents that turn bodies against themselves, and nuclear devices that could erase cities in a flash of light. We built machines to think for us, and those machines found even better ways to cause death and destruction. We created viruses that could spread through computer networks and disable entire civilizations, and weapons that could manipulate gravity itself and tear ships apart at the atomic level. The display shifted to show the consequences being built in a massive orbital shipyard above Earth. And then we scared ourselves, Rodriguez continued. We looked at what we had become and what we had created, and we realized that if we continued down this path, we would eventually destroy ourselves completely. So we made the Yellowstone Accords, and every nation on Earth signed them and agreed to never again use these weapons against each other. But we did not destroy the weapons. Instead, we gathered them all together, every terrible invention from every war we had ever fought, and we put them into one ship. She gestured at the walls around them. This ship. The consequences is not a warship in the traditional sense, because it was not designed to fight wars. It was designed to end them permanently. The bridge was silent as the weight of those words settled over everyone present. Vance stood from her chair and walked to the main display that showed the alien fleet surrounding Earth. The aliens out there have conquered 37 worlds, she said. They have never lost a battle, and they have never faced a species that refused to surrender. They think we are foolish or desperate or insane. They do not understand that we are none of those things. We are simply humans, and we learned long ago that the best way to prevent a war is to make the cost of starting one too terrible to contemplate. She turned to face her crew directly. What we are about to do will be witnessed by the entire galaxy, because the aliens are broadcasting this confrontation to their home worlds as a demonstration of their power. They want their people to see Earth fall. Instead, their people will see something very different. They will see what happens when you threaten humanity. They will see the consequences. The tactical display showed the countdown reaching 10 minutes remaining. All hands to battle stations. Vance commanded. Charge all primary weapons and prepare secondary systems. For deployment, navigation plot attack pattern Omega 7. Shields to maximum and activate adaptive armor. The ship hummed with power as systems that had been dormant for years came fully online for the first time since the Consequences was commissioned commander. Chun took his position at the tactical overview station and began coordinating the weapon systems that would soon be unleashed. "Captain," he said, "the aliens are scanning us heavily now, and I think they're finally starting to realize something is wrong." "What are their readings telling them?" "That we are putting out more power than their entire 4 battle group combined." Vance allowed herself a small smile. "Then they are beginning to understand, but they do not truly understand yet. They will." She sat back down in her command chair and watched the countdown continue. 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 6 minutes. The alien fleet remained in position, confident in their numbers and their weapons and their history of victory. They had no idea what was coming. No idea at all. "Captain," Rodriguez reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the alien flagship." "Put it through." "Fleet Commander." Varaxios appeared on the screen again, and this time there was something different in his 4 eyes, something that might have been the beginning of doubt. "Human," he said, "my sensors are detecting energy readings from your vessel that should not be possible, and I am beginning to think you were not bluffing." "I told you," Vance replied calmly. "We do not bluff. We warn. Once. You have 5 minutes, Commander. Use them wisely." She cut the transmission before he could respond, and the countdown continued toward 0. The Consequences waited in silence, surrounded by enemies who still did not understand the magnitude of their mistake. But they would learn very soon. They would learn. The countdown reached 0, and for a single heartbeat, nothing happened. Fleet Commander Varaxios allowed himself to feel relief, because perhaps the humans had been bluffing after all, and perhaps their strange ship with its impossible power readings was nothing more than a desperate trick. Then, Consequences moved, and everything changed forever. The human ship did not accelerate like a normal vessel, pushing against the void with engines and thrust. Instead, it simply vanished from one location and appeared in another, as if space itself had folded to accommodate its passage. "What?" Crixinal gasped from beside the command chair. "That is not possible." Before anyone could respond, the Consequences vanished again and reappeared in the middle of a formation of heavy cruisers on the far side of the blockade. Weapons fired from every surface of the human ship simultaneously, and those weapons were unlike anything the hegemony had ever encountered. Beams of concentrated gravity struck the nearest cruiser, and the massive warship crumpled like paper, being crushed in a fist as the beam compressed it into a dense sphere of twisted metal, no larger than a ground vehicle. Missiles launched from the Consequences, but they did not fly toward their targets in straight lines. Instead, they phased through the shields of the enemy ships, as if those shields did not exist, and detonated inside the vessels. Where armor could not protect Thema, wave of energy rippled outward from the human ship, and every hegemony vessel it touched simply stopped functioning as their computer systems crashed and their power cores went dark. In the first 30 seconds, 3,000 hegemony warships ceased to exist. Varaxios stood frozen at his command station, unable to process what his eyes were showing him. This was impossible. This could not be happening. All ships he finally managed to shout, "Concentrate fire on the human vessel now." The order went out across the fleet, and tens of thousands of warships turned their weapons toward the consequences. The space around the human ship became a solid wall of energy beams and missiles and kinetic rounds as the combined firepower of the mightiest armada in galactic history focused on a single target. The barrage continued for 10 full seconds, and during that time enough destructive power to crack a planet in half poured into the location where the Finave array consequences floated when the firing stopped and the light-faded Varaxios stared at his display with all four eyes wide in horror. The consequences remained. The ship hung motionless in space, completely undamaged, and its hull now glowed with a strange light that pulsed and shifted like something alive. "That is not possible," the weapons officer whispered. "We hit them with everything we had, and nothing could survive that." "They absorbed it," Crixnall said in a voice hollow with shock. "Their shields absorbed all of our fire." Varaxios watched the readings on his display as the truth became clear. The human ship had not just absorbed the energy of their attack, it had stored that energy and converted it. And now the power readings from the consequences were climbing higher and higher beyond anything his sensors could properly measure. "Evasive action," he screamed. "All ships scatter," and he never finished the sentence. The consequences released the energy it had absorbed, but not in the same form it had received. Instead, the human ship broadcast a wave of electromagnetic radiation, tuned to the exact frequency of hegemony shield generators, and every shield in the fleet flickered and died at the same moment. Then, the real weapons came online. From hidden ports along the hull of the consequences came swarms of small objects that spread outward in every direction, like seeds scattered by the wind. These objects attached themselves to the hulls of hegemony ships and began to eat. "What are those things?" Crixnall demanded as he watched a destroyer nearby dissolve piece by piece. As the small machines consumed its armor and structure, nanomachines, the science officer reported with terror in his voice, self-replicating. Nanomachines that break down matter and use it to build more of themselves. Within minutes, the swarm had grown from thousands to millions to billions of tiny machines spreading through the fleet like a plague, consuming everything they touched. Ships that tried to flee found their engines disabled by precision strikes from the consequences, which seemed to be everywhere at once, appearing and disappearing through space with impossible speed. On the bridge of the human ship, Captain Vance watched the tactical display with cold focus as her crew executed their attack plan with perfect precision. "Swarm deployment at 60%, Rodriguez reported. "Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking down, and multiple ships are attempting to retreat." "Do not let them," Vance commanded. "Switch to gravity mines and seal the escape routes." The consequences fired. Different type of weapon, now launching pods that spread out to the edges of the battle zone and activated with pulses of artificial gravity. Any ship that tried to flee found itself caught in the grip of these mines and pulled back toward the center of the engagement zone, where the swarm waited hungry for more material. "Captain," Commander Chun called out, "the enemy flagship is attempting to rally their remaining forces for a coordinated counterattack." Vance studied the tactical display and saw that Varaxios was indeed trying to organize his surviving ships into a defensive formation. It was a reasonable tactic against a conventional enemy, but the consequences was not conventional. "Show them what we did not want to use," she said quietly. "Activate secondary weapons." Chum hesitated for just a moment because he knew what those weapons would do. "Captain, are you certain?" They had their chance to leave, James, and they chose to stay, and now they faced the consequences of that choice. Chun nodded slowly and entered the activation codes, deep within the ship systems that had been locked away since construction powered up for the first time. The science teams who had built these weapons had hoped they would never be used, because even among all the terrible things humanity had created, These were considered too horrible for anything but the most desperate circumstances. But this was exactly that kind of circumstance. The consequences opened fire with weapons that bent the laws of physics in ways that should not have been possible. A beam of absolute cold struck a battleship and froze it so completely that the atoms of its hull stopped moving entirely, and the ship shattered into dust when the gravitational stress of nearby vessels touched it. Missiles that carried artificial singularities detonated among formations of cruisers, and small black holes appeared for brief moments, swallowing everything within their reach before evaporating in bursts of radiation. A pulse of energy swept through the battlefield, and every organic being it touched experienced their neurons firing randomly for 3 seconds, which was enough time for crews to lose control of their vessels and crash into each other. And still the consequences kept fighting, kept killing, kept showing the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. Fleet Commander Varaxios watched his mighty armada die around him and felt something he had never experienced before in his long career of conquest. True absolute complete terror. 60,000 ships gone in less than 10 minutes. 60,000 ships destroyed by a single human vessel. How? He whispered to no one in particular. How did they build something like this? His science officer answered with a shaking voice, barely able to form words. They built it from pieces. Commander, from thousands of pieces, from 10,000 years of war against themselves. And we thought they were primitive. But they are not primitive at all. They are just very, very good at killing. And they have been practicing on each other for longer than our species has existed. The flagship shuddered as a gravity lance clipped its shields, and Varaxios knew with terrible certainty that his ship would be next. Humans had barely begun, and already his fleet was broken, and there was nothing he could do to stop what was coming. The battle had lasted 47 minutes, and Fleet Commander Varaxios had stopped giving orders. 20 minutes ago, there was no point anymore. He simply stood at the observation window of his crippled flagship and watched the destruction of everything he had spent his life building. 83,000 ships were gone now, and the debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, creating an artificial ring around Earth made of twisted metal and frozen bodies and shattered dreams of conquest. Remaining 17,000 vessels of his once proud armada had scattered and were trying desperately to flee, but the gravity mines held them in place. Like insects caught in a web, at the center of it, all the consequences continued its methodical, terrible work. Varaxios had seen many things in his career as a military commander. He had watched worlds burn and civilizations fall and species kneel before the might of the hegemony. But he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen a single ship defeat an entire armada. He had never seen weapons that seemed to come from nightmares rather than engineering laboratories. He had never felt so completely and utterly helpless. "Commander," Crixenol said weakly from where he lay on the damaged bridge floor with green blood seeping from a wound on his head. "We are receiving a transmission." "From who?" Varaxios asked without turning from the window. "From our homeworld." That got his attention, and he turned slowly to face the communication display that had somehow survived the damage to his ship. The face of Supreme Hegemon Vaxtrios appeared on the screen, and the ruler of 37 worlds looked as shocked and horrified as Varaxios felt. "What is happening out there?" the Supreme Hegemon demanded. "We have been watching the battle feed, and we cannot believe what we are seeing." "It is exactly what you see, Supreme One," Varaxios replied in a hollow voice. "We are being destroyed. By one ship. By one ship." The Supreme Hegemon stared at him through the screen for a long moment. "How is this possible, and why did we not know that humans possessed such technology?" Varaxios laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound, because they did not build it for us, Supreme One, and they built it for themselves. He gestured at the window where another hegemony vessel was being consumed by the nanomachini swarm. Do you see those machines eating our ships? And those are called gray goo weapons, and the humans invented them to use against each other in something called the Resource Wars. And the gravity weapons that crush our vessels into balls of metal, and those came from their Third World War. And the missiles that pass through shields like they are not there, and those were developed during something called the Cold War, when two groups of humans pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to destroy their planet several times over. Laura Axios turned back to face the Supreme Hegemon directly. We studied them, Supreme One, and we thought we understood them, and we saw a young species that fought among themselves constantly, and we assumed that made them weak. We were wrong. We were so terribly wrong. On the bridge of the consequences, Captain Vance watched the exchange between the alien commander and his leader with grim satisfaction. Her communication officer had hacked into the enemy transmission network 20 minutes ago, and now everything that was said aboard the alien flagship was being broadcast to every world in the hegemony. Trillions of aliens across dozens of star systems were watching their invincible armada be destroyed by a single human vessel. That was the point. The consequences was not just a weapon, it was a message. Captain Rodriguez reported enemy fleet strength is down to 12,000 vessels, and most are heavily damaged. Continue the attack, but reduce intensity. Vance ordered, I want survivors. Commander Chun looked at her with surprise. Survivors, Captain? Yes, James. Because dead aliens cannot tell others what happened here, and I want every being in that fleet to go home and describe exactly what they witnessed. I want them to have nightmares about this day for the rest of their lives. I want their children and their grandchildren to hear stories about the day one human ship destroyed 100,000 hegemony warships. That is how we prevent this from happening again. She stood from her command chair and walked to the main display. Fear is a coward's weapon too, and sometimes it is the most effective weapon of all. The aliens out there conquered 37 worlds because no one believed they could be beaten. And now we are showing the entire galaxy that they can be beaten, that we can beat them. And we can do it with one ship. Chun nodded slowly as understanding dawned. We are not just defending Earth. We are establishing deterrence. Exactly. Vance confirmed, after today, no species will ever look at humanity and see easy prey again. They will see the species that broke the hegemony. They will see the species that turned their greatest armada into a debris field. They will see the consequences of threatening us. On the alien flagship, Varaxios had fallen silent as he processed everything that was happening. His mighty fleet reduced to barely 10,000 ships, his reputation destroyed, his species humiliated before the entire galaxy. And it had all been done by one ship with a crew of 32 human Supreme Hegemon. He said finally, I recommend immediate surrender. The silence that followed was profound. No hegemony fleet had ever surrendered in the entire history of their species. It was considered the ultimate disgrace, and commanders who surrendered were executed, along with their entire family lines. But Vaxtrios was watching the same battlefield as everyone else, and he could see the mathematics clearly. At the current rate of destruction, the hegemony fleet would be completely eliminated in less than an hour. And then, what would stop the humans from taking that terrible ship and pointing it at hegemony worlds? Nothing. Nothing would stop them. Contact the human vessel, the Supreme Hegemon ordered, and tell them we accept their terms, whatever those terms might be. Varaxios felt something break inside him as he gave the order to his communication officer. Had never failed before, he had never been beaten before. He had never felt so small and insignificant before the human captain appeared on his screen, and she looked exactly the same as she had at the beginning of this nightmare, calm and focused and utterly without fear. Fleet Commander, she said, I see you have decided to be reasonable. What are your terms? Varaxios asked, and the words tasted like ash in his mouth. Terms. Vance seemed almost amused. We have no terms. Varaxios blinked all four eyes in confusion. I do not understand, and you have beaten us completely, and you can demand anything. We do not want anything from you. Vance replied, we never wanted anything from you, and all we wanted was to be left alone. You came to our world with 100,000 warships and demanded our surrender, and we said no. And then we defended ourselves. That is all this was, Commander. Self-defense. We did not ask for this fight, and you brought it to us. And now you have seen what happens when you do that. She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to bore directly into his soul. Go home, Commander, and take what remains of your fleet, and go back to your worlds and tell everyone what happened here. Tell them that humanity was happy to share the stars peacefully. Tell them we offered friendship and trade and cooperation. Tell them you chose war instead. And tell them what war with humanity looks like. Varaxios could find no words to respond. Could he possibly say to that, you have 1 hour to collect your surviving ships and leave this system? Vance continued, after that we will resume our attack. Do you understand? Yes, Varaxios whispered. I understand. The transmission ended and Varaxios gave the order to retreat. The once mighty hegemony armada limped toward the edge of the solar system, leaving behind a debris field that contained the remains of over 88,000 warships, and the consequences watched them go silent and patient and ready to resume its terrible work if needed. The message had been delivered. Now the galaxy would learn what it meant. 3 days had passed since the battle, and the consequences hung in orbit above Earth, surrounded by a debris field that stretched across the void like a monument to human determination. Captain Helena Vance stood on the observation deck of her ship and looked down at the blue marble below with tired eyes that had not seen sleep in far too long. The planet was safe. Her people were safe. That was all that mattered. The door behind her opened and Commander Chun walked in with a datapad in his hands and an expression of concern on his face. Captain, you should rest because you have been awake for over 70 hours now. I will rest when this is finished, James. It is finished, Captain, and the alien fleet is gone, and they will not be coming back. Vance shook her head slowly. The battle is finished, but the aftermath is just beginning. And have you seen the reports from the intelligence division? Chun nodded, and his expression grew more serious. The hegemony broadcast of the battle was received by over 400 known civilizations across the galaxy, and every species that has developed interstellar communication now knows what happened here. Exactly. Vance turned to face him. And that means we need to control the narrative before others decide what this means. She walked past him toward the bridge with purpose in her stride, despite her exhaustion. Open a channel to all frequencies, she commanded as she entered the command center. I want this message to reach every corner of the galaxy. A communication officer worked quickly and within minutes confirmed that the broadcast was ready. You are live, Captain, and transmitting on all standard frequencies. Vance straightened her uniform and faced the recording device. With the same steady gaze she had shown Fleet Commander Varaxios. This is Captain Helena Vance of the United Earth Coalition vessel. Consequences, and I am addressing this message to every species in the galaxy. 3 days ago, a fleet of 100,000 warships belonging to the hegemony entered our solar system with the intention of conquering our world and enslaving our people. We gave them a warning and told them to leave, and they refused, so we defended ourselves. The result of that battle is now visible to anyone with a telescope pointed at Earth, and the debris field surrounding our planet contains the remains of 88,000 alien warships. 12,000 ships were allowed to retreat and carry this message back to their homeworld. She paused and let the weight of those numbers sink in for anyone listening. I want to be absolutely clear about something. In humanity did not start this conflict, and we did not seek it, and we did not want it. We reached out to the stars, hoping to find friendship and knowledge, and the chance to learn from civilizations older and wiser than ourselves. Instead, we found an empire that saw us as nothing more than another species to be conquered and exploited. We said no, and when they refused to accept that answer, we showed them why saying no to humanity is a very bad idea. She walked slowly across the bridge as she continued speaking. I know many of you watching this will be afraid of what you have seen. And I understand that fear because what we did to the hegemony fleet was terrible. It was violent and brutal and devastating beyond anything most species have ever witnessed. But I want you to understand something important. We did not enjoy it. We did not celebrate it. We built this ship and these weapons because we had to, and because we looked at ourselves and saw what we were capable of, and we were horrified. Humanity spent 10,000 years killing each other in ways that grew more creative and more terrible with every generation. We invented weapons that could destroy cities in seconds and plagues, that could wipe out continents, and machines that could think faster than any organic mind and turn that intelligence toward destruction. And then we stopped 17 years ago. Every nation on Earth signed an agreement called the Yellowstone Accords, and we promised to never again use these weapons against each other. We took all the terrible things we had created, and we locked them away on one ship, and we hoped we would never have to use them. The hegemony gave us no choice. She stopped walking and looked directly at the recording device. So here is my message to every species out there watching this transmission. Humanity wants peace. We want to trade and explore and learn and grow alongside our galactic neighbors. We want to build relationships based on mutual respect and shared benefit. We are reaching out our hand in friendship. But if you take that hand and try to drag us down, we will show you exactly what that hand is capable of. We will show you the consequences. Her voice hardened with determination. We did not survive 10,000 years of trying to destroy ourselves just to be conquered by someone else. We did not drag ourselves back from the brink of extinction time after time just to kneel before an empire that sees us as less than animals. We earned our place in this galaxy with blood and sacrifice and suffering that you cannot imagine. And we will not give it up, not for the hegemony, not for anyone. She allowed herself a small smile. But we would much rather be your friends than your enemies. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, and Vance felt the tension drain. From her shoulders it was done. The message had been sent now. All they could do was wait and see how the galaxy responded. Commander Chun approached her with a cup of hot coffee and a look of admiration on his face. That was well said, Captain. It was the truth, James, and nothing more. She took the coffee and sipped it gratefully. What happens now? Chun asked. Now we wait and we watch and we hope that no one else decides to test us. And if they do, Vance looked out the main viewport at the debris field that surrounded Earth like a warning sign written in twisted metal and frozen death. Then we remind them why this ship is called the Consequences. She finished her coffee and finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building. For days, you have the bridge, Commander, because I'm going to get some sleep. Understood, Captain, and rest well. Vance walked toward her quarters but stopped at the door and looked back at her crew. These 32 people had just fought and won the most one-sided battle in galactic history. They had saved their entire species from conquest and slavery. They had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. And they had done it without losing a single crew member. One more thing, James. Yes, Captain. Make sure the crew knows how proud I am of them, because what we accomplished today will be remembered for as long as humanity exists. They know, Captain, but I will tell them anyway. Vance nodded and walked through the door, leaving the bridge to her first officer. In the silence that followed, the crew of the Consequences continued their work, monitoring communications and tracking ship movements and watching for any sign of another threat. But deep down they all knew that no threat would come, not for a very long time. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was not to be threatened. Humanity was not to be pushed, because when you pushed humanity, they pushed back, and they pushed back very, very hard. The consequences remained in orbit above Earth, a silent guardian and a constant reminder of what humanity could do when given no other choice. And somewhere across the galaxy, in the halls of power and the councils of war and the meeting rooms of 100 different species, the word spread: do not threaten the humans. Do not attack the humans. Do not give the humans a reason to build another ship like that one. Because if you do, you will face the consequences, and no one survives the consequences.